What if the quietest soul you ever ignored turned out to be the greatest hero you'd never know? Picture this. A young soldier snickers, his voice sharp with mockery, as an elderly man pushes a rusty mower outside the base gates. Still chasing glory with that mower. Grandpa, the soldier jeers, his words slicing through the crisp morning air. The old man, hands weathered, cap faded, offers only a gentle smile. Unassuming, unnoticed, until a colonel steps forward, his salute so sharp it silences the laughter in an instant. That man isn't just a groundskeeper. He's a legend who shaped the very ground they stand on. Step into his boots for a moment. You're mowing in silence. You're past a hidden fire that could burn their mockery to ash. Would you reveal your true identity to set them straight? Or keep mowing, letting your actions speak louder than words? Share your choice in the comments below, and join us on this journey with daily narrated stories, where we uncover the heroes hiding in plain sight. Subscribe now. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support brings these stories to life. Every dawn at 6, the soldiers of Fort Bradley noticed him. Samuel Carter, an elderly man in scuffed combat boots, guiding a creaky Toro mower along the base's perimeter. The machine groaned with age, its red paint chipped and faded, a relic from another time, much like Samuel's own joints, which ached with the weight of decades. Yet both pressed on with a relentless rhythm, the engine sputtering with each push, a heartbeat of time's unyielding march. Samuel's hands were steady, guiding the mower with the precision of a man who'd once directed battalions through chaos, his fingers tracing the worn grip as if it were the hilt of a sword. Most dismissed him as a retiree clinging to routine, his faded cap bearing no rank, no insignia, just the scars of sun and time etched into its fabric, a silent testament to years under harsh elements. Some whispered he was a veteran unable to let go, his presence a quiet echo of a military life he couldn't leave behind, while others wondered if he was lost in his own mind, a ghost of a bygone era, haunting the base with his unyielding persistence. Fort Bradley hadn't employed groundskeepers in years, outsourcing maintenance to a private firm that cared more for profit than precision. Yet Samuel appeared daily, trimming neglected edges, writing crooked signs, and gathering litter the contractors ignored. Candy wrappers, cigarette butts, and the occasional crumpled note, each piece a small blemish on the base he loved. Keeps this soul steady, he'd murmur to the rare soldier who nodded his way, his voice a low rumble, like gravel smoothed by a lifetime's river, carrying the weight of wisdom earned through hardship. The air was thick with dew that morning, the scent of fresh-cut grass mingling with the sharp tang of military fuel wafting from the motor pool nearby, a reminder of the base's constant hum of activity. Samuel's hands gripped the mower's handle, calluses pressing into the worn grip, each push a quiet rebellion against the years that weighed on his shoulders. His boots, cracked and scuffed from decades of wear, left faint imprints in the damp earth, a testament to his unyielding routine, each step a silent vow to honor the ground he'd once commanded. Inside, a flicker of pride stirred. He knew this base better than anyone, its every corner a memory of command shouted, lives saved, and the weight of decisions that had shaped destinies. He could still hear the echo of his own voice barking orders during a long-ago training exercise, the crackle of radios in the humid air of a Korean summer, the distant thud of artillery in Panama, the cries of wounded men calling for their commander. But the soldiers passing by saw none of that. A young private, Ethan Mills, smirked as he jogged past with his squad, his breath visible in the cool morning air, a faint cloud of defiance. "Old guy thinks he's still in the fight," he muttered, loud enough for his buddy to chuckle, their laughter a sharp jab at Samuel's pride. But Samuel's face remained a mask of calm, his heart heavy with the weight of secrets they'd never guess, his eyes tracing the horizon as if searching for the ghosts of his past. Samuel paused to adjust his cap, the faded fabric soft against his fingertips, its brim shielding his eyes from the rising sun, which cast a golden glow over the base. That cap had been with him through every campaign, a silent witness to the chaos of war and the quiet of peacetime. its threads holding memories of sweat-soaked days and sleepless nights. Now, it was just another piece of his anonymity, a shield against the curious glances of those who didn't know better. He bent down to pluck a piece of litter, a crumpled energy drink can, tossed carelessly by a soldier the day before, its metallic surface glinting in the early light. The act was small, but to Samuel, it was a matter of principle, a refusal to let the base he'd once led fall into neglect. Fort Bradley had been his home, his command, his responsibility, a place where he'd forged men into soldiers, where he'd mourned the fallen and celebrated the victorious. Even now, decades after his stars had been packed away in a drawer, he couldn't let it decay. The grass under his feet felt alive, each blade a thread in the tapestry of his past. And as he mowed, he felt the ghosts of his soldiers walking beside him. Men he'd led, men he'd lost, men who trusted him to bring them home, their voices a faint whisper in the rustle of the morning breeze. The morning routine was a ritual, a sacred act of service that kept Samuel tethered to the man he'd once been, a general who'd led with steel and compassion. He moved methodically, his steps measured, his eyes scanning the ground for imperfections, his senses attuned to the smallest details. A bent signpost near the barracks caught his attention, its metal frame leaning from a recent storm, a silent casualty of nature's wrath. He set the mower aside, the engine's hum fading into silence, and walked over to the post, his boots crunching on the gravel path. With a grunt, he pushed against it, his muscles straining as he forced it back into alignment, the creak of metal echoing in the still air. Sweat beaded on his brow, the salty tang mixing with the earthy scent of the soil, a reminder of the countless days he'd spent in the field, leading men through the muck and mire of war. A passing soldier glanced his way, but said nothing, his expression a mix of indifference and mild curiosity, his mind already on the day's drills. Samuel didn't mind the lack of acknowledgement. He wasn't here for praise. He was here because Fort Bradley was his, in a way no one else could understand, its grounds a canvas for his unspoken legacy. As the sun climbed higher, Samuel's thoughts drifted to the soldiers he'd once led, their faces vivid in his memory despite the passage of time. There was Private Daniels, a young man with a quick smile who died in Korea, his laughter silenced by a sniper's bullet. Lieutenant Harper, who'd saved a dozen men in Panama by dragging them from a burning chopper, only to succumb to his injuries hours later. And Captain Ellis, whose strategic mind had turned the tide in a critical operation, earning Samuel's respect and friendship until a roadside bomb claimed his life. Each memory was a weight Samuel carried, a burden of love and loss that fueled his daily pilgrimage to Fort Bradley. He mowed not just to maintain the grounds, but to honor those who'd never made a home, to keep their memory alive in the only way he knew how. The rhythm of the mower became a meditation, each pass a prayer for the fallen, each blade of grass a tribute to their sacrifice. Samuel's hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the intensity of the memories that surged through him, a flood of emotions he'd long learned to contain. The soldiers' mockery grew bolder with each passing day, their voices carrying over the hum of Samuel's mower like a discordant melody, a cacophony of ignorance that grated on his nerves. A newly arrived sergeant, Clara Hensley, shouted over the rhythm of a morning PT run, "Move faster, recruits, or I'll have the old gardener whip you into shape." The group erupted in laughter, their voices echoing across the parade ground, sharp and cutting, a blade against Samuel's quiet resolve. Clara's tone was playful, but her words landed like a stone in Samuel's chest, a heavy reminder of how far he'd fallen in their eyes. He adjusted his cap, the fabric soft from years of wear, and kept mowing, his silence a shield against their barbs, his hands tightening on the mower's handle as if to anchor himself against the tide of ridicule. The laughter faded as the squad moved on, but the sting lingered, a quiet ache that settled deep in his bones, a wound that bled pride rather than blood. He'd faced worse. Enemy fire, the screams of the wounded, the weight of sending men to their deaths. But this was a different kind of battle, One fought with dignity against ignorance, a war of endurance rather than violence. That Tuesday, as the flag-raising anthem blared through the speakers, Samuel stopped his mower mid-stride, the sudden silence amplifying the weight of the moment. His back straightened, years melting away as he stood at attention. The national anthem stirring memories of jungles and gunfire, a haunting melody that pulled him back to the battlefields of his youth. The notes of the Star-Spangled Banner filled the air, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices he'd witnessed, the men he'd buried, the promises he'd made to bring his soldiers home. His hand snapped to his brow in a salute, the motion as instinctive as breathing, his body remembering what his mind tried to forget. Nights spent under a starless sky, the weight of a rifle in his hands, the taste of fear in his mouth. The flag rose slowly, its colors vivid against the gray sky, and Samuel's eyes traced its ascent, a lump forming in his throat, his chest tight with the weight of memory. He could almost hear the distant crack of rifles, the thrum of helicopters overhead, the whispered prayers of soldiers under his command, their voices a chorus of trust and terror. A group of recruits nearby snickered, one snapping a photo with his phone, the flash of brief flare in the dim light. Stolen valor, the caption read on social media, the posts spreading like wildfire among military circles, each share a dagger in Samuel's quiet resolve, a betrayal of the honor he'd spent a lifetime upholding. The air felt heavier that day, the sky a bruised gray, as if mirroring the recruits' ignorance, a storm brewing in both the heavens and Samuel's heart. His chest tightened, not from anger, but from a quiet sorrow that threatened to overwhelm him, a grief for the values that seemed lost to this new generation. He'd led men through hell, yet here he was, a punchline in a world that had forgotten what leadership looked like, a world where respect was a currency he could no longer spend. Finishing his work, he wiped down the mower with a rag, the metallic scent of oil grounding him, a familiar comfort in a world that felt increasingly foreign. He stored it in a shed by the east gate, the small, weathered structure a mirror to his own worn frame, its paint peeling like the memories Samuel carried. As he closed the door, he felt a pang of loneliness, a hollow ache that echoed the emptiness of the shed. He walked off base, his steps steady, his dignity unshaken, though inside, a storm brewed, a tempest of memories and unspoken truths, a whirlwind of battles fought and lives lost. What no one knew was that Samuel Carter had once worn stars on his shoulders. He'd commanded battalions in Korea, orchestrated evacuations in Panama, and led Fort Bradley during its golden years, a time when the base had been a beacon of military excellence, a fortress of honor and discipline. Now, he was just an old man with a mower, or so they thought. The social media post gained traction, shared among military groups with captions ranging from amusement to outright disdain, each comment a fresh wound in Samuel's quiet pride. Some speculated he was a homeless vet, desperate for connection, their words dripping with pity that felt more like condescension. Others questioned his mental health, their comments a mix of concern and scorn, as if his dedication was a sign of weakness rather than strength. Samuel didn't see the posts, but he felt their impact in the way the soldiers' glances shifted, less curious, more mocking, their eyes carrying a judgment he didn't deserve. A young corporal, James Riley, passed by one morning, tossing a half-hearted salute in Samuel's direction, the gesture more mockery than respect. "Morning, General Green Thumb," he called, his tone dripping with sarcasm, a smirk playing on his lips. The nickname stuck, spreading among the recruits like a wildfire, each utterance a reminder of how far Samuel had fallen in their eyes, a bitter pill he swallowed with every step. But Samuel kept his focus on the grass, the rhythm of the mower a steady heartbeat that drowned out their words, a lifeline to the man he'd once been. He remembered a time when respect was earned through blood and sacrifice, not titles or appearances, and he clung to that truth like a soldier clings to his rifle in the heat of battle. A grizzled staff sergeant, Marcus Tate, paused during his morning rounds, watching Samuel salute the flag with a precision that felt hauntingly familiar, a ghost of military discipline that stirred something deep within him. The air was crisp, the scent of pine from nearby trees mingling with the grass Samuel had just cut, a fresh, earthy aroma that grounded Marcus in the moment. His brow furrowed, his gut whispering that this was no ordinary retiree, a suspicion that gnawed at the edges of his mind. Marcus's thoughts drifted to a memory of a commander he'd served under in the late 80s. A man who'd led with quiet steel, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos of war, a beacon of strength in the darkest moments. "Something's off," he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the bass waking up, the distant shouts of drills echoing in the background. Marcus shook his head, dismissing the thought, but the seed of doubt was planted, a quiet suspense building as he wondered if history was standing right in front of him. He lingered a moment longer, watching Samuel return to his mowing, the older man's movements deliberate, almost ceremonial, each push of the mower a testament to a discipline Marcus couldn't quite place. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial, a piece of the past he'd yet to uncover, a mystery that would soon unravel. Samuel became a base mascot of sorts, a figure of amusement among the newer recruits, their mockery a daily ritual that grated on his nerves. "Here comes the marshal of the meadows." They jeered, mock saluting behind his back as they passed, their laughter a cruel echo in the morning air. The nickname had evolved, each iteration more mocking than the last, and Samuel felt the weight of it with every step, a burden he carried with the same stoicism he'd shown in battle. The Stolen Valor post gained even more traction online, comments ranging from pity to scorn. Some veterans speculated about mental health struggles, others about a vet desperate for purpose, their words a mix of concern and condescension. A few even suggested he might be dangerous, a security risk in disguise, their paranoia a stark contrast to Samuel's quiet dedication. Eventually, a formal complaint reached base administration. An unknown civilian accessing the base without credentials was deemed a security risk, a potential threat in a world where trust was a luxury the military could no longer afford. Security protocols had tightened in recent years. The days of locals wandering onto military bases were long gone, replaced by a labyrinth of rules and regulations. Questions swirled in command meetings, forms were filed, and base security was dispatched to handle the issue, their footsteps heavy with the weight of protocol, their faces set in grim determination. On a crisp Friday morning, 2 MPs approached Samuel as he trimmed near the flagpole, the grass clippings sticking to his boots, their green hue a stark contrast to the cracked leather, a vivid reminder of the life he'd chosen. The flagpole gleamed in the morning light, a sentinel of order in the midst of the base's chaos, and Samuel had always taken extra care around it, as if honoring the flag honored the men he'd lost, their faces a constant presence in his mind. "Sir, we need your base access credentials," one MP said, his hand hovering near his holster, more out of habit than threat, his voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. The MP's eyes darted between Samuel and the flagpole, as if unsure whether to salute the flag or the man before him. Samuel straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that smelled faintly of cedar, a scent that reminded him of the forest he'd marched through in Korea, the memory of bittersweet comfort. "Don't have any current ones," he replied, his voice steady, unshaken by the confrontation, his eyes meeting the MP's with a quiet defiance. "Never needed them before." The second MP's tone was firm. "You can't be here without authorization. How do you get on base?" "Through the east gate," Samuel said simply, his gaze unwavering, his voice carrying the weight of 8 years of routine. "Been doing it for 8 years. The MPs exchanged a glance. The gate was meant to be secured, monitored by cameras, and the realization that Samuel had slipped through for nearly a decade sent a shiver of unease through them, a crack in the foundation of their security protocols. The confrontation felt surreal to Samuel, a stark reminder of how much the world had changed since his time in command, a time when honor and trust were the bedrock of military life. He remembered a time when a soldier's word was enough, when trust was the currency of the military, a bond forged in the crucible of war. Now, it was all badges and protocols, a labyrinth of rules that seemed to choke the very spirit of service he'd lived by, a bureaucracy that valued paperwork over principle. The MPs stood a little taller, their training kicking in, but Samuel could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes, a hesitation that spoke of their discomfort with the situation. They didn't want to be here doing this, but duty demanded it, a duty that felt hollow in the face of Samuel's quiet dignity. The air was thick with tension, the scent of grass and diesel, fuel hanging heavy as the base hummed with morning activity around them. The distant shouts of drills a stark contrast to the silence between them. Samuel's heart ached, not for himself, but for the soldiers who'd lost sight of what it meant to serve with honor. Even in the smallest acts, a loss that cut deeper than any wound he'd sustained in battle. "Sir, you'll need to come with us to the security office," the first MP said, his voice softer now, as if he sensed the weight of Samuel's presence, a weight that transcended the rules he was bound to enforce. Samuel nodded, shutting off his mower with a final sputter, the silence that followed almost deafening, a void that echoed the emptiness in his chest. He followed without protest, his steps measured, his head held high despite the indignity of the moment, his dignity a shield against the humiliation. The security office was a small, sterile room, its walls lined with faded posters about base protocols and safety reminders, their colors washed out by time. A lieutenant, Rachel Ford, reviewed his case with a mix of exasperation and pity, her fingers tapping impatiently on the desk as she spoke, her eyes darting between Samuel and the paperwork before her. "You're not on any contractor list, and you don't have a work badge," she said, her voice softening as she took in his weathered appearance. The lines on his face telling a story she couldn't quite read, a story of sacrifice and service. Samuel reached into his pocket, producing a folded, yellow document, an Army retirement form from 1985. The paper was brittle, its edges worn from years of being carried, a tangible piece of his past that he'd kept close, like a talisman against the passage of time. "I served here once," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades, a weight that seemed to fill the room. "Just keeping things in order." General Lawson knew. So did Colonel Harris before him. Rachel skimmed the paper, noting the name, but not the rank, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of it, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Both officers had long since rotated out, their names little more than footnotes in Fort Bradley's history, ghosts of a time she'd never known. "Mr. Carter, I respect your service, but this isn't valid anymore," she said, her tone gentle but firm, as if she were explaining something to a child, her words a quiet dismissal of Samuel's legacy. Times have changed. The words stung, a quiet reminder of how the military he'd known had evolved into something colder, more bureaucratic, a machine that valued rules over honor. Samuel was escorted off base, his mower confiscated as abandoned equipment, the MP's voices fading as they discussed what to do with it, their words a distant murmur as Samuel walked away. He didn't argue, walking through the main gate with the same quiet grace he'd carried for years, nodding to the guards who watched with mild curiosity, their young faces a stark contrast to his weathered one. The guards didn't know the man they were watching, but something in Samuel's posture made them pause, a flicker of respect passing through them despite themselves, a silent acknowledgement of the strength they couldn't quite name. That weekend, a photo of his removal spread online, taken by Ethan Mills, the same recruit who'd mocked him. Comments flooded in. Some urged to leave the old man alone, insisting he was harmless, while others speculated he was just lonely, their words a mix of pity and judgment. But one comment stopped the chatter cold. It came from Colonel Nathan Brooks, Fort Bradley's commander, who'd been at a conference in D.C. for 2 weeks. That's Lieutenant General Samuel Carter, former commander of the 5th Armored Division, decorated with the Distinguished Service Medal and Bronze Star. "I served under him in Panama. This is shameful." The words hit like a thunderclap, the weight of Samuel's legacy crashing over the base like a tidal wave, a revelation that shook the very foundations of Fort Bradley. Inside the small home where Samuel lived, the scent of coffee filled the air as he sat on his porch. the morning sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden planks, their grain a map of the years he'd endured. He'd known this day might come, yet the ache in his chest wasn't for himself. It was for the soldiers who'd failed to see what true leadership looked like, a failure that cut deeper than any battlefield wound. The coffee was bitter on his tongue, a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun, and as he sipped, he let his mind wander back to Panama. The heat, the chaos, the men who'd looked to him for guidance, their faces etched in his memory like scars. He'd never sought recognition, but the shame of being escorted off the base he'd once commanded cut deeper than he'd expected, a wound that bled pride rather than blood. Yet, even in that moment, he felt a quiet resolve, a steadfast belief in the principles he'd lived by. He'd done what he believed was right, and that was enough, a truth that anchored him against the storm of emotions raging within. Monday morning, 3 Humvees rolled into the modest neighborhood where Samuel resided, their engines rumbling through the quiet streets, a stark intrusion into the stillness of the morning. Colonel Brooks stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel path to Samuel's porch, his uniform crisp and his face etched with a mixture of determination and regret, his eyes searching for the man he'd come to honor. "General Carter," he called, his voice carrying the weight of respect, a stark contrast to the mockery Samuel had endured, a voice that spoke of a debt long overdue. Samuel stood, a spark of recognition in his eyes, the lines on his face softening as he took in the man before him, a flicker of warmth breaking through his stoic facade. "Colonel Brooks, good to see you," he said, his voice warm but measured, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Brooks' face was taut with regret, his eyes searching Samuel's for forgiveness, a silent plea for absolution. "Sir, I just learned what happened. Why didn't you tell them who you were?" Samuel sipped his coffee, the steam rising like a memory of battlefield smoke, the bitter taste grounding him as he considered the question, his mind tracing the path of his life's choices. "If they can't recognize it," he said after a long pause, his voice steady, "they're not ready to honor it." The words hung in the air, a quiet challenge to the values of the base Samuel had once led, a testament to the leadership he'd embodied for decades. That afternoon, Colonel Brooks called a mandatory assembly at Fort Bradley, parade ground, full uniform, the order echoing through the base like a call to arms. The base buzzed with speculation. Deployment orders? A surprise inspection? No one linked it to the old man they'd escorted out, their minds preoccupied with the immediate demands of military life, their thoughts far from the quiet figure who tended their grounds. Under a blazing sun, the entire base stood in formation, the same ground Samuel had tended for years, its grass now a vibrant green thanks to his care, a living testament to his dedication. Brooks took the platform, his voice steady, cutting through the oppressive heat, each word a hammer striking the anvil of their ignorance. In my absence, a grave breach of respect occurred. This man, he gestured to Samuel, who'd arrived in a civilian van, still in his work boots but now wearing a faded gray shirt, led troops through Korea and Panama. He commanded this base from 1980 to 1985 as a lieutenant general. For 8 years, he's maintained these grounds, not for recognition, but because a leader's duty never ends. Silence gripped the ranks, the air thick with the weight of realization, a heavy stillness that seemed to press down on every soldier present. The soldiers who'd laughed now stood rigid, shame burning in their chests like a wildfire, a searing heat that consumed their earlier arrogance. Ethan Mills' face drained of color, his earlier mockery a bitter memory that tasted like ash in his mouth, a regret that would haunt him for years. Brooks saluted Samuel, the gesture sharp and reverent, a symbol of the respect Samuel had been denied for so long, a salute that seemed to cut through the very air between them. "Permission to follow your example, sir?" Samuel returned the salute, a flicker of emotion in his hazel eyes, the first crack in his stoic facade, a moment of vulnerability that spoke volumes. "Permission granted, Colonel," he said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet pride, a pride earned through decades of service. Battalion commanders followed, saluting with the respect they'd give a sitting general, their movements precise, their faces a mixture of awe and guilt, a collective reckoning for their failure to see the truth. Then, Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling, his hands shaking as he saluted, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Sir, I'm sorry for what I posted. I didn't know." Samuel's gaze was steady, forgiving, his eyes searching Ethan's for a spark of understanding, a glimmer of the soldier he could become. "You saw what you saw, Private. Next time, look deeper. The uniform doesn't make the soldier. The soldier makes a uniform." Ethan lingered after the assembly, the sun dipping low, casting golden light over the parade ground, the sky a canvas of orange and pink that seemed to honor the moment. The scent of sweat and grass clung to the air as he whispered to a friend, "I thought leadership was loud. Medals, orders. But he showed me it's in the quiet things." I'll never forget that. The words were barely audible over the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, but they carried the weight of a revelation, a lesson that would shape Ethan's future. Ethan's friend nodded, his own eyes distant as he remembered Samuel's steady presence. The way he'd mowed with a purpose that now seemed sacred, a quiet act of service that spoke louder than any order. The assembly dispersed, but the air remained charged with a newfound respect, a palpable shift in the base's atmosphere. Soldiers who'd once mocked Samuel now walked with their heads bowed, their laughter replaced by a quiet introspection, a reckoning with their own ignorance. Samuel stood at the edge of the parade ground, watching them go, his heart a mixture of sorrow and hope, a complex tapestry of emotions woven from years of service and sacrifice. He'd never wanted this moment, but now that it had come, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden he'd carried for 8 long years. Fort Bradley was remembering what it meant to honor its own, and for Samuel, that was enough, a quiet victory in a life defined by service. That evening, a small ceremony unfolded at the East Gate Samuel had used for years. A bronze plaque was unveiled, inscribed with words that carried the weight of his legacy, in honor of Lieutenant General Samuel Carter, who never ceased to serve. Beside it, his old mower was mounted on a pedestal, no longer a tool of ridicule, but a monument to humble leadership, its chipped paint gleaming under the soft glow of the setting sun. The soldiers who'd mocked him were tasked with maintaining the grounds he'd tended, not as punishment, but as a lesson. "You'll learn the difference between appearances and standards," their sergeant told them, his voice firm but kind. Samuel never returned to mow at Fort Bradley. He didn't need to. Squads of soldiers now took up his work, their silence a tribute to the man who'd done the same without reward, their hands tracing the same path Samuel's had for years. When asked if he missed his routine, Samuel smiled, his eyes crinkling with quiet wisdom, the lines on his face softening in the golden light. Leadership isn't about being seen. It's about ensuring the work endures, even when you're gone. His words became a mantra at Fort Bradley, where a new tradition emerged. Each week, a recruit read Samuel's service record, learning of his courage in Korea, his innovations in peacetime. They were told, with a reverence that echoed through the barracks, that this is what honor looks like in work boots. Samuel's story reminds us that true leadership often hides in plain sight, in the quiet acts of service that go unnoticed until they're gone. Have you ever met someone whose silent actions change your perspective? Share their story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how they inspired you, just as Samuel inspired Fort Bradley. On Memorial Day, Colonel Brooks invited Samuel as the guest of honor at Fort Bradley ceremony. Reluctant at first, Samuel agreed, stepping onto the stage with the same unassuming grace he'd carried for years, his work boots a stark contrast to the polished uniforms around him. His speech was brief but piercing, each word a testament to the life he'd lived. The truest leaders serve when no one's watching. The crowd stood, many wiping away tears, saluting the man who'd taught them leadership through silent service. Samuel's story rippled beyond Fort Bradley, becoming a cornerstone of leadership training across the military, a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of actions over titles. Each evening at Fort Bradley, the youngest soldier on duty now walks to the gate, salutes the plaque, and whispers Samuel's words, I never left my post. Future soldiers may never meet the quiet man with the mower, but his lesson endures, etched into the very ground he tended. True leadership isn't in the stars on your shoulders. It's in showing up day after day, doing what's right without expectation. Daily Narrated Stories is proud to share these life-changing tales that uplift and inspire. Stories like Samuel's that remind us of the heroes among us, the ones who lead with their hearts, not their titles. If Samuel's story moved you, don't let this moment slip away. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support ensures we can keep bringing you stories that ignite hope and courage. Share this video with someone who leads by example, and join our community of story lovers who believe in the power of silent service. The time to act is now. Don't miss your chance to be part of something truly inspiring.